This is light work. Come on, spill the tea. Yeah. Ooh.
Hey y'all,
What's good?
I'm Laura.
And I'm Dee, and welcome to Spill the Tea with Laura and Dee.
What's our topic today?
Today, we are unlocking the hidden potential of your properties.
Yes, make that money.
When we're talking about assessing properties, one, just understanding your actual goal is. Then you want to assess the structure as it is. Then you want to consider the layout. And then once you've done that, that's when you can start budgeting.
Understanding the goals, yes. We've got a project right now that we're looking at. It's a listing that I'm about to take on, and that was something we were talking at. The questions he was asking me was, why do I get so many different offers from investors? What are they doing at the end? I think his property could be pushed to a $550,000 sale.
Right.
Now, that would be a huge risk. So as an investor, what is your risk tolerance level? And I think that's what starts your goal. Because with this house, get it to 550, you're taking down 2 walls. Have you been renovating long enough to take down those 2 walls and make it cost effective on your budget?
Right.
One thing that I'm starting to see a ton of conversation about is midterm rentals.
Interesting.
That's something that people need to be putting on their goal objective as well and thinking about. We are starting to get a much more nomadic generation. You're starting to see this generation coming up, the millennials. A lot of people are still going to college. A lot of people aren't. They're taking on those jobs. Colorado, as the housing market is getting so expensive, a lot of people are starting to build cars out to live in them. Knowing those end goals and understanding what's relevant in that market is important.
What would you say for individuals that maybe have a house that's potentially going to go into foreclosure, or even if it's a probate property, right? How would they kind of go about those goals together? The importance of having somebody to help you, because it's kind of an emotional time in some instances.
Correct. If you're in probate, if you're dealing with a family home, I encourage you to sit down away from the home, get your process in order, and know your long-term is. Being on the MLS opens you up to the most buyers. And so with that client, what her and I did, we are working together, chunking down the projects to see what her financial budget, current budget today can tolerate. How much will that make her on the back end? And I always encourage my clients budget, and we project on very conservative numbers.
Right.
As you're looking through those, project on those conservative numbers, know the market, know what's important for that market. A good midterm rental environment would be around a hospital or around a lot of different things. It's in Marietta, it's in a good area. It's just not super, super, super close. There's not a lot of draws.
Right.
So for them, they've decided she wants to downsize. She wants to sell it. Now we are working through what's going to net her the most money with the least amount of headache. And I think that's your objective.
Right.
Looking to just sell. Least amount of headache, most amount of money,
Right.
least amount of time on market. And once that's assessed, you can list.
Once that happens, what would we say if someone else was going to assess a property, what to kind of keep an eye out for? I know most people aren't really
Call me. Call
excited
you.
about getting under a crawl space or
Major things to look out for if you're assessing those properties and you've not walked through them before. Diagonal cracks are huge. Sheetrock situation or in brick. If crack kind of follows a stair step or a diagonal line, it means there's multiple points of stress on that particular the house.
Right.
Same thing with the crack in the sheetrock, right? If that crack in the sheetrock is on a diagonal, mean that there's shifting in the foundation more than you want to see, because that shifting has put enough stress to actually break the sheetrock. If it's vertical or horizontal and it runs along a sheetrock seam, probably not a huge deal. Same thing with your concrete. If you're vertical, you see a vertical wall crack, not that big of a deal. If you see it horizontal, it means that something is actually bowing that wall in and out. And from there, you're looking for a quarter of an inch. So if your pinky fits in a crack, even if it's vertical or horizontal, you're looking for that crack. That's something I would say really watch out for. Water is huge. Water is awful. It can damage. It can cause mold. There's a lot of ramifications that come with water. So keep a close eye on that.
For water, the easiest ways to see it is for a stain. There aren't always situations where there's going to be a stain.
Correct. Sometimes people will paint over and it's gone.
So like, for instance, I had an issue with a washer once. And I didn't realize that the way that the dishwasher was built, all of the workings were in the back. So you couldn't fix it unless you pulled it all the way out.
Right.
And it had just been leaking. And it was all under the floors. It started getting in. And so we didn't see it until it finally...
It's a big problem.
Right. So I think being aware of that You could end up going through a house and there may not be no water stains, but it could be like really muggy or sticky or,
Correct.
you know.
Be cognizant of smell.
Mhm.
You can smell mold. You can actually feel the moisture in the air. So as you're walking through the properties, look for those kind of things.
When the fans start
Yes,
to blow,
when the
that's
fans,
a good, yeah.
If a fan in a bedroom or in a space has any kind of sagging, there's a moisture problem somewhere.
Correct.
There is definitely a moisture problem somewhere, and that's a good telltale sign. Components, right? Your utility components.
Correct.
Check the age of those things. If you have a system that's old, it's got any kind of leak, then likely the recommendation is going to be to replace it. Because repairing it and getting that freon is just going to start costing more, and it's not going to be advantageous to fixing it because of the upkeep cost. When you walk in a house, make sure, like, you can sometimes see the sag, so kind of feel for that. You are brave enough to get underneath a crawl space. If you have wood touching, that is not right. May not have to be changed. We see this all the time on decking, even not in a crawl space, where 4x4 instead of an 8x8 post was used. And at one point, the 4x4 was acceptable. 4x4 post is a no-no in today's standard. Wood on ground is a problem because you've got termites and, again, moisture. Water is always bad.
Whenever I go into a crawl space, I'm generally looking for those cement footers. If there's no cement, at least brick. I'm usually trying to see if it's on like piers or like how it's actually built.
Check the floor joists, right? We see all the time where a floor joist has been broken. If you don't know if you're looking at that thing, kind of be mindful that broken wood underneath there, some broken
anything.
Not a deal, but I would say water, cracks, sagging. Those are your biggest three telltales. If you see those three things, that means movement, water intrusion is going on.
The layout, what's going nowadays? Is it still just the open feel, or are we starting to shift into a different design time frame? Or
when you are designing and you are creating a space, your objective is to create that space for the most amount of buyers to be excited about that space.
Which is hard because you can get emotional.
Correct. And while design is important, staging is equally as important. When you're designing, yes, buyers are still wanting to see an open floor plan. They are wanting to see a nice flow, something that I think a lot of buyers are accepting because people are realizing that a lot of the homes in this country, especially in the Atlanta market, were built in the 80s and 90s, early 2000s, right? Still, kitchen is going to be connected, but your dining room is still going to be off by itself. So line of sight. If you can't open everything up, make sure there's a clear line of sight to other spaces in the home.
You and I, when we go to look through properties, generally our first thoughts are, if we're going to open up this house, okay, our next thought is which one of these walls is load bearing. Okay, well, if we look at a particular part of the floor plan and we think this wall should go load bearing, your point, there are different ways to get that same open feel without getting rid of a load bearing wall.
So something that I've seen in some design elements is an open wall. Totally take the sheetrock out, they take all of the electrical out, and they just leave the stud. But there's a lot of ways to achieve that floor plan goal without spending an arm and a leg if your budget is minimal. And know what those big projects are first and understand what those budgets look like and get to those as soon as you can. But get to your big stuff first. That way you know where you can cut corners.
I think a good thing to do, especially beforehand on the project, we may set up a list of features that we're going to input. Out of those features, I rank them. And then from there, from a budget perspective, to your point, once you get to a point where it's like, okay, well, we have to spend more for this. Now we're still trying to keep a similar design, yada, yada, yada. You just go to that list and be like, all right, we're going to take this off. We're going to take this off. This gives us some money here to now use somewhere else. Speaking of budgeting, to your point with the materials, I think it's good to kind of check before you start diving in. Sometimes your contractor can kind of help you with that. But it's really good to go and see it for yourself because generally that's what they'll do. You can essentially go and budget out your entire home. It's a task, but you can budget out the entire home.
And as you get more and more experienced, there's going to be certain things that you never deviate from. You're going to find a company that's got a good product for a good price that you like, that works for your market. Your standard stuff you're going to get, even in tile, right? Like you may have a go-to laundry tile or a go-to 4 or 5 tiles that are fun, exciting, add that pop of color, add that little bit of character to that space. You only choose choose from 4 or 5.
You bring up a really good point, especially with the toilet. because we had this issue on one of our flips. The specific manufacturer didn't really know until we had bought like the first or second toilet, and we would bring it back every time and it would be broken. We just ended up deciding to go with a different toilet. But to your point, we would just keep that exact same brand so that we wouldn't have to worry about it breaking.
It was packaged well, it shipped well, it worked well, all the things were right.
And that's why flippers, especially the experienced ones, can kind of run their numbers so quick, because it's just like, if you already know all the materials you're buying, you just got to check to see if the price has changed. Right?
And at some point you have a warehouse.
Exactly. But when it comes to permitting is, based on your goal, you think it's getting you to the right direction. And then next thing you know, you got somebody knocking on your door talking about something. You owe us X amount of $1,000 because you didn't do something.
My perspective on permitting is know the area. I will never flip another house without verifying that there's a historic society or something overseeing it, right? And so the problem is home was flipped in 2017. The historical society was created in 2016. Therefore, the home fell under the rules of the historical society.
Right.
There was no signage posted. There was no information anywhere. Jonathan gets an email or a letter saying that he was not in compliance with the historical society, and we were thinking we were going to have to go and put like a whole garage back. The biggest thing that he got tagged with, they were pretty nice about it, which he's lucky. They don't always have to be. The biggest thing he got tagged with is apparently they're not allowed to paint brick, according to the historical society. And he's got a little pony wall in the front that's painted, it's brick. It's the only thing we've got to get the paint off of. That I think that's how it's going to kind of pan out for him. It's not totally done. But it's not just building permits that you're looking for. You have to make sure that if there's no HOA, nothing governing that you can see on that listing, on the property, if you're looking to purchase, make sure you're doing your due diligence on the back end to see what other entities outside of an HOA govern those properties.
Exactly.
So your permitting should help alleviate those issues, because you don't want to be known in the area as the renovator who doesn't do their permitting or who doesn't do the steps, because nobody's going to want to buy from you because of the possible potential problems. And so at this point in my career, I may have said your first renovation, if you're just painting and just updating and freshening, you don't need a permit. If you're doing anything on the exterior, I would check for need for permits. And it's like I said, it's not just the government permits, right? It's not just the city, county, or state permits that you're needing for that area. It's HOA, it's your historical societies, it's all the people that have an interest in your property.
Right.
And then if you're doing anything major on the inside, I would say if your project is over $7,000, I would look into getting a permit.
And that's a good point, because, for instance, I think City of Decatur, they have like a threshold. It's like if it's over $10,000, they want to hear about it.
Correct.
As a homeowner, it's probably a little different. I mean, you would kind of lean on your realtor a little bit. Maybe they have that expertise. As an investor or someone really even looking to get into it or just wanting to renovate a house, I would say that really should just be a part of your process. There's always a line that you can call to at least find out if it's in a historical society.
Correct.
Or if there's some kind of restriction related. And then from there, you can kind of know before you even purchase the house. Right? Because it's like I had to do a permit on something once, and after we purchased the house, we found out we had to do certain things, which would have been nice to know before, because we could just get them done. The homeowner could have started the process.
Correct.
Do you know what time it is?
Question quickies.
Yeah, you did. I'm actually going to skip the list for one.
Okay.
Because I have a question.
Yes.
What a midterm rental?
Yes. So midterm rentals are a new thing we're starting to hear a lot about. A short-term rental, anything that does not create a tenant-landlord situation, so 30 days or less, 29 days or less.
Right.
Okay. Someone stays in your house for 30 days or longer, they are considered a tenant, and to remove them, you have to evict them. That is something that is important to know. So a midterm rental is a rental that is available for rent 30 days to about 9 months. So anything over 9 months is going to be considered a full long-term rental. And these midterm rentals are becoming very, very popular. Your home needs to be furnished. Apartment complex, there's something called Furnish Finders out there. If you're looking for midterm rentals, it's a great website if you're thinking about doing midterm rentals.
Might be good though.
So you're seeing a lot of people who are moving. They don't want to rent for a year. And there's a lot of movement in the country right now. With COVID, we see a lot of people who have decided they're going to work from home. So they're moving closer to family. They're doing this, they're doing that, completely virtual.
Be careful, by the way, if you move to work somewhere, but you're working for somewhere else, you could end up having a dual state tax requirement.
Yeah, or so to talk to your CPA.
So call your CPA.
Because another thing about midterm rentals, especially if you are focusing on an industry, a lot of times the industry pays the tab. But understand your city and understand what industry draws those midterm rentals.
Right.
Because if it's a place like by the lake, right, you're not supposed to do short-term rentals in Forsyth County. You can do a midterm rental.
Interesting.
Right.
Because I was just assessing a property a homeowner was foreclosed on, and we were going to try and help them out. The one thing we couldn't figure out was, where were they going to live, right? While we were working on the house. I mean, we can put them up in a hotel. We can put them up in I can find a short-term rental. At the end of the day, it's going to be pricey.
Right. Short-term rentals are more expensive than a midterm rental.
Right. But imagine if we had our own midterm rental or something like that. And to your point, it's already vacant because you've rented it out for the year.
And
next question. What are the common mistakes to avoid when investing in real estate?
Don't get emotional.
That's a good point.
You know,
being emotional, I feel like has been something from a society perspective that has just always come along with us over the years.
Sure. We're an emotional society.
Yeah. And it's like, I guess by the time you really boil down to it, it's like, yeah, you're going to be living there, hopefully for a while. It's probably the largest purchase you've made. As soon as you get emotional, you just start making terrible decisions.
No logic. It's all emotional decisions.
Yeah.
It's all, and if you're new to the investment world.
Oh yeah, it's really easy to get caught up in that emotion, and that emotion will destroy you.
Yes.
Speaking of, you want to hear the next question?
Yes.
How do we find reliable contractors for renovating properties in Atlanta?
I called David.
Home Depot and Lowe's in the morning. Referrals are huge. Also, other investors, they'll kind of have people that they work with.
Yep.
There are a couple of sites that you can use. The only thing with those is it's a lot of crap.
Yes, it is. So do you want to hear my favorite way to find a really good contractor?
Oh goodness, what is this?
So what Stacy did was he targeted his market. Okay, so he went around and he looked at all the cities he wanted to renovate in when he was first getting started.
Oh wow.
Found a target market. Then started stalking all of the local projects.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can stop at projects
and stop in.
The folks that are out there,
they'll talk to you.
The folks that are they'll be so excited.
They did a bunch of projects, followed the projects for about 3 months, looked at the craftsmanship. He looked at all of the stuff that was happening, and he made a proposal to someone, and then he actually just found one by looking at their work. So I like that idea.
When we first started looking for contractors, I did that a little bit. So like, obviously, as people are driving by, you'll see the trucks. I used to write down those numbers. If I saw some folks working on a roof, I'd be like, we need some roof work.
Right.
They generally would have cards, or they would be happy to give you their phone number or anything. And then from there, it's just like, they've already seen your face, right? They know you're serious.
So most realtors, most people in our industry know somebody. Don't lose your realtor and your lender's number. Like, we know everybody. This is a national number. Everybody knows 7 realtors. That's a fact. If you start counting it up, you do, which means you've got access to all these humans, right? All these questions that you think you need answers to, they're already at the fingertips of your power right there.
You're right. It's a good point.
But most people know 7 can only call 2 to their brain when put on the spot. Yeah.
Well, that kind of wraps it up for today. Thank you all for joining. If you found this helpful or entertaining, please like, share, comment if you have any questions.
And
subscribe so you hear about our next episodes. Peace.
This is light work. Come on, spill the tea. Yeah. Ooh.